Hi everybody, Dave here. Our CyberWire podcast team is taking a well-earned break for the holidays, but don't fret, we'll be back January 2nd with all new episodes of our show. In the meantime, we're running extended versions of some of our favorite interviews from 2019. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all of you. Stay with us. My guest today is Bob Ackerman. He's managing director and founder of Allegis Capital, an early-stage venture capital firm. Prior to starting Allegis Capital, Bob was the president and CEO of Unisoft Systems, a global leading Unix systems house, and founder and chairman of InfoGear Technology Corporation, a pioneer in the original integration of web and telephony technology. Full disclosure, he is also among the leadership team at DataTribe, which is an investor in the CyberWire. Our conversation focuses on his insights on where VC funding for cyber is heading in the coming year. But first, a message from our sponsors, McAfee. Ideas don't come for free. Budgets are begged for, long hours are required, the months, maybe even years of research, the sheer human effort of it all, the changes, the revisions, the reworks, the results. The adaptation, the innovation, the collaboration all lead to the final moment when it pays off. And it's perfect. Your company's work. As long as it's not compromised. From device to cloud, McAfee harnesses the power of 1 billion threat sensors to design security that moves beyond intelligence to insight. So you can move beyond optimizing security products to optimizing your security posture. And not just react to threats, but remediate threats that matter. Intelligence lets you respond to your environment. Insights empower you to change it. McAfee, the device-to-cloud cybersecurity company. To learn more, go to McAfee.com/insights. That's McAfee.com/insights. And we thank McAfee for sponsoring our show.
There's a growing appreciation for a number of aspects of the cyber environment from an investor's perspective. I think number one, we've all witnessed sort of a massive influx of capital into the cyber innovation ecosystem. I think there is concern today that the sector may be overcapitalized, overinvested in. I think that's probably a legitimate concern. So I think that investors are becoming more discerning. They're looking for more differentiation, which I think is appropriate. I often get asked the question, is cyber overinvested? And, the answer is yes and no. And yes, there are too many people doing the same thing, all basically competing for a slice of the budget. And many of those companies are going to struggle because there are too many. You look at threat intelligence is a great example. There are too many threat intelligence companies. We don't need. So I think threat intelligence is a good example of, it's an indispensable area of innovation from a customer's perspective. But I would argue, we've got far more threat intelligence companies than we need or the market can sustain. So I think investors are becoming more discerning as they look at the cybersecurity marketplace, looking for things that are truly differentiated. As opposed to Me Too companies that are doing things marginally better. So as I said, if I step back, I look at there are sectors of cybersecurity that are overinvested, and there are going to be problems and challenges with many of the companies in that space. There are also areas of cybersecurity I think that are underinvested, and I think these are the areas where we need to be paying more attention. If you look at 2019. You look at the growing interest, for example, in industrial control system security. That is not a sector that is overinvested. I would argue that it is appropriately to underinvested, and I think that the investment community is going to be paying more attention to those types of opportunities. But I'll tell you, give you an example from our own portfolio, Dragos. When Dragos first, began at DataTribe and was getting ready to do its Series A financing, we talked to a number of folks in the venture community, about Dragos and why we thought Dragos was compelling and why we thought industrial control systems was going to be an important sector of the security marketplace. And sort of the classic reaction within the venture community was, yeah, but industrial controls, that moves slow, it's big customers, not really sure it's, industrial is venture financeable. 2 years later, that dynamic has changed radically. So I think when you think about investing in cybersecurity, you need to be thinking about the not so obvious. You need to have a fundamental understanding of the problem sets, how those problem sets are evolving, and sort of an understanding of the solutions that are likely to be brought to bear in dealing with those problem sets. And that's where you should be making investments, as opposed to sort of looking at where the marketplace is today and looking for something that's marginally better than another company offering, functionality X in that given space. And this always goes back to, my contention is that cyber is a very, very difficult market to invest in part-time. You really need to have a fundamental, deep understanding of the market, the underlying technologies, the threats, how those threats are evolving, how they likely will evolve, where the new threat vectors are likely to open up. And if you have that fundamental understanding, you can begin to identify where you want to be. The old Wayne Gretzky metaphor of skating to where the puck is going to be, as opposed to where the puck is today. And I think in cyber, we run the risk of too many people skating to where the puck is today, and not enough people skating to where the puck is going to be. Now, as a cyber investor, I'm perfectly comfortable with that dysfunction. Because
you're not going to bet against your self-interest, right?
Yeah, we pride ourselves on having kind of a fundamental understanding of the marketplace and how the market's evolving, and both at an Allegis level, those are the opportunities we're looking for. And in many cases, if we identify an opportunity, we will go start a company, which is what we do at Data Tribe. We have a fundamentally different approach to the marketplace. It's served us well over the years. That's why I kind of come out on this duality of, is cyber overinvested? Yes and no. The legacy here today, stop the water from coming through the dike, types of solutions are probably overinvested. The prescriptive, preventative, how do we manage cyber risk and exposure differently? Types of technologies are underinvested. And so I think we're on this cusp of transitioning from first generation cyber to second generation, much more prescriptive and preventative technologies that are hopefully going to allow us to get ahead of some of these cyber threats as opposed to reacting to them.
So looking forward to the year ahead, what areas within cyber have your attention? What has your gaze?
Well, I think one of the things that I'm spending a fair amount of attention on is how do we get better at managing? So much of what we do today is basically a knee-jerk reaction. We do the best we can. We deploy as many tools and technologies as we can to secure our infrastructure, to secure our data. But sometimes it reminds me a bit of whack-a-mole, just trying to stay ahead of the evolving threat landscape. And I think we've taken that approach out of necessity as we try to catch up with the various threat vectors. But I think we need to transition to a more holistic view of cyber risk. And we need to manage cyber as a risk type. And we need to get better tools and better technologies to understand our exposure. And so, Phil Venables has been talking a lot about continuous controls monitoring, and I think he's right on the money here. The concept behind continuous controls monitoring is basically we have integrated dashboards that kind of look at our infrastructure, look at our data sets, look at our application environment, and give us a top-down and a bottom-up view of where are we covered, how covered are we, where are we exposed, where might a problem occur. And it basically gives us a dashboard that allows us to understand our security posture and to prioritize the deployment of resources, whether those financial resources, technology resources, human capital resources, to the areas where they will do the most good. So that concept of continuous controls monitoring, I think, is something that we certainly are spending a lot of time thinking about, again, developing a holistic view of our cyber risk on our cyber exposure so that we can better prioritize and allocate resources to be more secure. And I view that as part of the natural evolution of how we manage cybersecurity risks.
Where do you see us in terms of consolidation? What do you think we're going to see in 2020?
We've got too many companies doing important things, but with insufficient differentiation against the size of the available market. So we need to see rationalization in some of these areas. And I always use threat intelligence just kind of as one of the easy ones. At the same time, I think we're going to continue to see more and more major players move into the cybersecurity market. They're going to move into various segments of the market through acquisition. So that will be another form of consolidation. And I look at that as all part of the sort of the ebbs and flows, right? If you look at tidal systems, the tide comes in, tide goes out, and there's a cleansing in that process. The same thing happens in markets. And so I think we're going to see a rationalization of the cyber market. I think investors are going to become more discerning about where they invest. I think companies that don't have demonstrated critical mass or a clear line of sight to demonstrate a critical mass are going to struggle. Those companies are going to be ripe for consolidation or acquisition. And in either case, if they don't have the critical mass, they're going to be consolidated one way or another, probably from a position of weakness as from a position of strength. And that's just the way the ecosystem works. It's not a bad thing. It's just part of the natural ebb and flow of the market. At the same time, my hope, as we talked about a little bit earlier, is we'll see more attention on some of these truly disruptive approaches to managing data and data risk and data exposure that allows us to get a little further ahead of the game. We talked a little bit about continuous controls monitoring as an approach to getting better insights into our cyber preparedness and the insights that allow us to better and more effectively manage. I continue to think that technologies like homomorphic encryption long term are going to play a significant role in ensuring that our data assets are secure by design. I think we're going to be spending more time thinking about data provenance. Today, data provenance probably best manifests itself in and around, fake news. But I think when you think about where cyber is likely to go longer term, I think we're going to move towards the weaponization of data, where it's not so much about stealing the data, though people will continue to steal and compromise data, but how do you manipulate data in order to achieve outcomes that may not be beneficial to whoever owns that data or whoever owns the infrastructure. We tend to think of that as the weaponization of data. And if you view that as a serious threat vector, you begin to think about data provenance. How do I trust the data? If I've got financial information that's being distributed digitally, and it's feeding automated trading systems that effectively trade at the speed of light, how do I trust the data? If I can't trust the data, the propensity for things to go wrong in the blink of an eye is very, very high. This is not about threat intelligence. It's not about endpoint. It's about taking a data-centric view to cybersecurity and understanding that the threat vectors will continue to evolve. Once we solve a particular category of threat vector, or solve largely for that category of threat vector, new attack vectors will open up. And we see weaponization of data as a prime candidate to be one of those major new threat vectors.
With all of the pitches that you see, and you see a lot of pitches, is there a pattern? Are there things that make people stand out from the crowd, things that draw your attention and make you want to dig in and take a closer look?
Well, first and foremost, going back to some of my opening comments about cyber, this is not something you do part-time. What that means for us, from an investor's perspective, it's why we are focused specialists in cybersecurity. But I think the same thing applies to entrepreneurs. Cyber is not something that you can pick up along the way. Cyber is something where you have to have a solid foundation upon which to build if you're really going to do innovative things. If you look at our playbook, that reflects itself in our bias towards engineers coming out of the intelligence community, either deep data science engineers coming out of the intelligence community or former offensive engineers coming out of the intelligence community. Our deep conviction is you cannot pick cybersecurity up on the fly. You really need to live in this world. You need to have a solid technical foundation in the threat vectors, the technology as it ebbs and flow, if you're really going to do disruptive things. So if I go back to your question about when we're being pitched by entrepreneurs, we parse very, very quickly based on folks that have got a career of domain expertise and those that don't. And frankly, if you don't have a career of domain expertise, it's going to be very, very difficult to get our attention. It's not that you're not smart. It's not that you don't have a good idea. It's our conviction is the cyber market moves so quickly that unless you have that solid foundation, you will not be able to move at the speed of the market. And so we select for entrepreneurs that have spent their careers in cybersecurity, either out of the intelligence community or out of the commercial sector. But we just don't think that you can learn fast enough to be competitive in cybersecurity because the market moves that quickly.
That's Bob Ackerman from Allegis Capital. Our thanks to McAfee for sponsoring our program. Visit McAfee.com/insights and find out why McAfee is the device-to-cloud cybersecurity company. For everyone here at the CyberWire, I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening.